after Gettysburg, right after the Lee retreats, the Battle of Vicksburg, which actually has been going on for a really long time, but it ends on July 4th. So we have a win at Gettysburg and a win at Vicksburg, and I want to talk a little bit about this. So Vicksburg happens to be in Mississippi. So this is Grant. So we're back out west, right? So the Army of the Potomac had secured a win with Gettysburg, and now we have out west with Grant, right? And the U.S. Grant, unconditional surrender grant, working at Vicksburg. So the thing about Vicksburg is, like I said, it's a win on July 4th. The thing about Vicksburg is that it's a fort. They have an actual fort on the river, on the Mississippi River, and it's high up and happens to have a 360 view of a bend in the river. So it's very difficult to actually attack because you're always seen. If you're coming in, you're going to be seen constantly. And so in order to attack, like, there's no surprise. And you also have the high ground here. So Grant actually is going to attempt to take down Vicksburg multiple times. I mean, he went as far as like digging trenches with water, like an irrigation system, to get some gunboats around the other side of Vicksburg. It was a failure. He went through a bayou in the back that failed. Like, everything was a failure. But this is Grant, right? He's got a lot of chutzpah, so he's not going to give up. And amazingly enough, the way it actually happens is the way he's able to succeed is that he, instead of attacking Vicksburg, actually leaves Vicksburg and attacks Jackson. And you're thinking to yourself, well, how does that get him to win Vicksburg? Well, remember, the one thing that the North has is that they have the numbers and they have the supplies. And that is something that the Confederates do not have. They're low in men and they're low in supplies. So Grant figured, if I double back and attack Jackson, Mississippi, right, the capital, if I go and do that, then they're going to be forced, those soldiers at Vicksburg are going to be forced to leave the fort at Vicksburg to protect Jackson. And that's exactly what happened, right? He pulled the soldiers out of Vicksburg. He attacked Jackson, and then eventually will double back to Vicksburg, and he will siege the fort. So the word siege is kind of a military term that means to surround and constantly attack. And after a while, they're not going to be able to take it, and they will surrender. Vicksburg will be a win for Grant and the Union. So now the Anaconda Plan is starting to come together, right? We've had that blockade, right? But our ultimate goal was to grab the Mississippi River as well, so that we can snake around them and just sort of squeeze them out, and block them from getting any supplies. So Grant was able to get the Mississippi River. So this is huge. So now we have to sort of go back east, right? Because he sort of secured the west. So now we have to go back east and secure the east. And that's going to lead us into an interesting situation with a guy named William Tecumseh Sherman. That is his name. William Tecumseh Sherman was excuse me, allergies. Sorry, I'm good, I promise. So William Tecumseh Sherman is a leader in the Union who's going to take a regiment of men down south towards Atlanta and Columbia in South Carolina. And the one thing, so William Tecumseh Sherman, he's, like I said, he's heading out back east. He was with Grant. He's heading east with his own regiment. He's ordered to march to Atlanta and take over the city. He also has to take over like other areas in South Carolina, like I said, with Columbia. And he decided that on his way there, he would allow his soldiers to do whatever they wanted with the land and with the people that they came across. It's something that we sort of consider like total war, right? He attacked not just soldiers that he came across, but civilians as well. He burned down farms. He destroyed whole towns, like burning down houses, burning down churches, burning down farms. He destroyed railroads and all sorts of like roads on his way there. And if you've ever seen, I don't know, have you ever seen Gone with the Wind? I don't know if you've ever seen that or read it. Chances are you haven't read it because the book is very large. But if you've ever seen the movie, there's a very famous scene where Atlanta is burning. Right, that's Sherman. What Sherman did to Atlanta, and they're trying to get away in a carriage and whatever. Anyway, so this was horrible, like atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. In fact, Sherman, when he wrote Abraham Lincoln about, he's like, oh, we secured, he says, I have a Christmas gift for you, Mr. President, Atlanta. And Lincoln was really thrilled about that. But then when he found out about the atrocities, he actually fired him. And then he actually put him on trial for insanity because he couldn't believe all of the things that were done on the way there. Something really fascinating. So there's Sherman in Atlanta. So this thing right here, this is really fascinating. I think this is fascinating anyway. Whenever they came across a railroad, they would cut the railroad ties and pull off like the metal rails and then build a huge bonfire and throw the metal rails on top of them, which would make the metal like pliable. And then they would take those metal rails that are now pliable and tie them around the tree, because it's not just destroying the railroad. Now they're rendering every supply that they have useless. If you go down south, they actually still have trees that have these grown in, like trees have gotten bigger, but you can see the railway tie there. They're known as Sherman's neckties if you were to go down south. And so again, it was a win for the Union, but then at the same time, it was sort of like, wow, you guys, Sherman's insane, right? So who killed a lot of women and children and the elderly, and it was just bad. So with that comes an election year. So it was the election of 1864, and Lincoln, of course, is going to be the Republican candidate. And he makes a very famous line. He says, you don't want to exchange horses in the middle of a river. Meaning, like, you don't want to bring in a different president when you're in the middle of the war. But here's the kicker, everybody. And by the way, you should be moving on to the, like, actual note that I gave you. You'll see there the page that says 1864. The election. Here's the kicker. The Democratic candidate is none other than McClellan. Oh my gosh. I love this picture. To McClellan. And here's the thing. There's not a lot of Democrats in the Union right now, because the only people who are participating in this election are the people in the unions. There's not a ton of Democrats. There are Democrats in the border states, right? We talked about that, the Copperheads. But in the end, it's actually going to be the election. It's going to be the win at Atlanta that will cement his win. So you have Gettysburg, then you have Vicksburg, and now you have Atlanta. And we're heading into a whole new year of this war. And it's very clear that we are moving towards the end of this war, and it's in our favor now. Amazingly enough, because if you think of this whole war, we've been doing terribly, but we're now starting to pick things back up, and it's just so much more with the South having such a hard time with supplies. With that said, once Lincoln is re-elected, he says, now is the time, now is the place. 13th Amendment, let's do it. And remember, the 13th Amendment is the ending of slavery. This isn't temporary. It's not slaves that live in the South, right? And we still have slaves in the border states. This is it. Slavery is done. He finally gets it done. And I think about this, right? This is so momentous. This entire year, we've been talking about the struggle of popular sovereignty and the issue over like states' rights, whether they can have slaves or not, and territories can have slaves, but states can't, and this, that, and the other thing. And it's just this whole rigmarole that we've been going back and forth over this entire year since the United States became the United States. All men are created equal with the exception of some men, right? That's insanity. And Lincoln said, "Now let's do this. Let's end this. We just won the election. We're winning this war. Now is the time. This is the time to do it." And he freed the slaves, right? And that's one of the reasons why Lincoln is one of the best. Anyway, so we're going to stop there for today. We're going to finish off the war on Monday. So I hope you have a great weekend. And yeah, we'll talk soon. Have a good one, guys.